Well, before we get into the message today, I want to share some exciting news with you. I have a new book releasing on February 13th. The book is called Do the New You. This is where I help you get 6 mindsets to become who God created you to be. These are the mindsets I preach to myself, and I can't wait to share them with you. Christ is in me. I am enough. I'm not stuck unless I stop. With God, there's always a way, and by faith, I will find it. I won't share all of them with you here, but you've got to pre-order the book right now. Go to dothenewyou.com after the message. Go now. Go after the message. Do both. Go to dothenewyou.com, and you'll see how you can get the book. It would mean a lot to me. And tell somebody too. Also, February 20th through 29th, me, Elevation Worship, Holly, Elevation Nights. Check elevationnights.com. See if we're coming near you. Okay. Now, let's get into the Word of God. Love you. God bless you.
Well, what an incredible time in God's presence this morning. And if you're just now joining us, welcome to Elevation Church. You know, we spent the last couple of minutes just singing about the faithfulness of God. And that's exactly what we're going to do here today is we're going to look back on 2023 and just thank God for all that he's done. We're going to talk about some special moments and specifically some sermons that we are still thinking about right now. And it's not just me. I have some other people here. We have Chad, Britt, and Jason. And we also have some lovely people from some of our local Charlotte area campuses. So thank you guys for being here today. Yeah. And it really has been an incredible year. It's very hard to condense down into just a couple things to talk about because God has been so good to our church. But I thought before we dive into the sermons, the things that really, we're still processing, Chad, if people have never been part of Coffee Fam before, do you want to explain the format today?
Yeah, so we're taking a little bit different format on this last Sunday of the year where we typically talk about the message. So like Colleen said, each week we get the opportunity to talk about the message that we just heard, and we call that Coffee Fam. And we typically do that live on Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. And so a lot of you join in online on YouTube or Facebook. And it doesn't matter if you go to a physical campus or not. Everybody's joining in to really dive in and discuss a little bit deeper of what the sermon meant to them. And so today we get that opportunity to look back and discuss some of these sermons. And I like to say I'm looking for those like Me Too moments where it's like, oh, you thought that too? That's the thought that I had. Or you were wondering that too? Well, I dug into that a little bit deeper too. So that's what we hope to do today.
It makes you feel so much better to know like, oh, I'm not the only one who's like struggling through this thing. And so, we're excited to talk about all of this. So if you join into Coffee Fam, we have to warm up the conversation a little bit. And so before we dive into the sermons, let's hit just what is like a moment or two for you guys that you look back on this year and you're like, man, I can't believe I got to see God do this or I got to be part of this thing.
Yeah, I'm tied between two, okay?
Okay, you can have two.
First of all, Belmont just had his first worship experience.
That's right. Yes.
December 24th.
Formerly known as Gaston.
That's right, formerly known, the artist formerly known as Gaston.
That's what we're gonna be saying.
11 years of non-permanent, we got to move into a permanent facility.
Awesome.
We got to worship God. His faithfulness it's been amazing.
That's great.
But I love how our church has different expressions.
Yes.
And so another expressions is our pop-ups. And we went to San Diego
to
do a pop-up. I went for the first time. We baptized 85 people.
Wow.
So it was my top moment just seeing that God is moving in a place that we don't have a building.
Yes.
And really people are committed to what God is doing in Elevation Church. I love it.
Wow, that's
What about
amazing.
you, Britt?
Okay. Well, you talked about, buildings and pop-ups. Okay, I'm like you. I got like two, all right? I got a tie. Okay, number one, it was not really a moment. It was like a 7-week moment. It was a 7-week Bible study that we did earlier this year called Immeasurably More. Maybe some of you might know what I'm talking about, but it was really a time where we got to journey through the book of Ephesians together as a church. Our pastor preached through Ephesians. We got to journey through it in small groups. So we, buildings, pop-ups, living rooms, coffee shops, Zooms.
That's right.
Whatever it takes to see the gospel go forth. So that was one. But then I also got to go with Love Week.
Yeah.
I mean, a week where we're in the community serving around the world.
Right.
Top moment for me, 2023. How about you, Chad?
Yeah, I love that. Well, I love that a few weeks back, we shared all of these different expressions of church and what you were saying of like, it's not just in a building like this, but this year, so many of you know, we got the opportunity to go to so many different states with Elevation Nights.
Let's go.
And Elevation Nights is something we've been doing for a few years, but it never gets old getting into an arena and sitting there with 10, 15,000 people
right.
who are worshiping together, who are listening to a message from pastor. And we got the opportunity to do that a bunch this year.
Yes, we did.
And I can't pick just one that was the best, but they're always an amazing time. And so if you haven't had the opportunity to get to one, you got to get to
That's right.
next. We're coming up on another Elevation Nights in February. So make sure that you get there if you can.
The Northeast, we're coming your way. Get excited. But yeah, no, I would echo everything you guys said. I'm just always in awe of like the reach God's given our church. When I started coming here, we were meeting in a high school, Providence High School. I don't know if anyone has been around that long, but it's just incredible to be hundreds of thousands of miles away to hear people singing the songs that God brought up out of our church, and to meet people who are like, my best friends are in my e-group, and you're like, you live in Texas or California. You're like, this is amazing what God is doing. And so I'm incredibly grateful to be a part of it, and I know most of you are as well. Why don't you go ahead, let us know in the chat if you have a favorite moment that we haven't said, or maybe we shared yours, but you can share it again, or if there's a sermon that you're hoping we might talk about. Now, we only have so much time, so we've narrowed it down to 3. And this is, like I said before.
I don't know how, but we did.
Don't know when, don't know how. That's right. So we have 3 that we're going to talk about. Jason, you want to start us off here?
Absolutely. One of my favorite. We had a couple of A words that Pastor started off with, but just a couple.
Great start.
Good ones.
Very good ones. For context, the first one was the God of also. If you know your favorite A word, that is a good word. Look at Chad, I'm making him blush over here. But we have the God of again. You know, so many put in the chat, and the crowd shouted out. But the God of also was one that challenged me personally. Because it was like, God is not just the God of Abraham, Isaac, or Moses, but he's also doing something in my life, not just around my calling of what he wants me to do, but who he wants me to become. All right, in case you missed it, we got a little recap for you, so take a look.
So the first thing we have to understand when we come to God is we must not box him in with our broken understanding of who he is or our limited language. For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. So God's calling is really about character. Why is God, who is holy, stooping down to call himself the God of Jacob? Maybe he wants you to know that he doesn't just want to be your God when you're living like a prince. Maybe he wants you to know that he is also God when I've got it together, but he is God when I don't. Stop hiding from God when you're feeling ashamed. Come to him and thank him that there's no shame on Jesus, so there's no shame on me. Biggest comfort in my life is that God knew it all when he called me. Jesus has given us all a gift that is common to us, but it is so specific to us. And our identity in him is the most important thing about us.
Wow. I'm telling you, the God of also was such a challenging moment for, I believe, all of us. For me, it was about getting into our character, not just our calling being what we're doing. And the topic Pastor started with, the character he started with was Moses. How Moses was called to deliver the people out of Egypt, but also caught in murder. He had a serious thing he was wrestling through. And I don't know about you in the crowd or in the chat. I just want you to put that one thing God developed in your character this year. I want to see it. For me, as a pastor, I know y'all think I'm just, floating on angel's wings.
That's what I think.
But God developed my... You don't think that, Chad? Okay, got it. But he developed my patience. And so I really want to know from you guys, like, what did God really do that you didn't expect him to do in your character as you trusted him?
That's a great question. You're going deep right off the bat, Jason.
The sermon went deep.
Well, let me start with this because you kind of hit on this, but I'm looking back at my notes, which this is why I love that we do this, because it just brings back all these things to mind.
Absolutely.
And I highlighted this. It says, before Moses ever called on God, God called on Moses.
I love that.
And so when you're talking about our character, there's times where, and I'm not speaking for everyone, just those of us that struggle with these little things, right? But there's times where I forget, and I like to think I'm a strong, independent woman, right? I got this. I'm on this, I'm doing my thing. But then like before I ever get to any of that, God's already called me.
Wow.
And it's so funny how sometimes we get amnesia.
Yes.
And we forget. And we think that we can do this like in our own strength or in our own way.
Absolutely.
But it all stems from God. So it's just such a beautiful picture because I love this quote. Before Moses ever called on God, God called on Moses. Before you ever called on God, God called on you.
It's great.
God called on me. We all have a calling in life. And so for my character, it's like helping me define purpose.
That's great.
And understand that what God has for me, like I can't even like foresee it. His ways are greater than our ways.
Absolutely.
So it's just a touching thing to go back and remember this and have that quote hit me the same way as it did when he preached it.
That's great.
You did say patience. You didn't expound on it, so I'm going to take it too. But I'm going to expound on it because it's in multiple areas in my life. So
good.
when I think about patience, I think about certainly just my life, my kids. You know, if you have kids, you're like, God's developing patience in my life as we speak.
Every day.
But it's really more about me wanting to see what it is that I believe is to come,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah.
Not just in my kids, but in my own life and in my workplace. And so as I'm thinking, man, God, I thought that it was supposed to look this way.
Come on.
I thought that it was supposed to get to that point earlier.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, patience is something for me that I think, I mean, I'm always thinking that things should be much faster than they should be.
Yeah.
But what I realize, even just looking back on this year, is I'm so thankful that God didn't do the things in the timing that I wanted him to do.
That's real.
Because then in a lot of ways, I'd be like, yeah, that's right. I knew exactly that's what was supposed to happen in that way.
Yeah.
When it happens like this, which is more often than not, you always look back and say, man, God, I'm just so thankful that you didn't take my advice on this one, but I'm following your advice and I'm following the plan that you're laying out for me step by step. So I think this year, it's a common theme for me, though. I don't know that that's going to go away next year and saying patience is the thing.
My kid's still going to be in the house, so it's coming back.
That's what I was gonna say. I was like, the character thing is like, I feel like when God like reveals something to you, you're like, got it, God, I'm gonna work on it. And then it gets frustrating when you're like, why am I still working on this thing over and over and over again? And Pastor Steven said a long time ago, he said, we will go through a lot of the same stuff over and over again, but the fact that we're aware of it, we're like circling it at a higher level. So like before, I wouldn't even known I was like frustrated or not being patient, but now I'm like, okay, God's like putting these little checks in my spirit. I was telling Britt this morning, I felt like even this morning, I think God knew we were gonna talk about this sermon, but I was walking my dog and I let him off leash. There was no one out for a little bit. I know people might come for me in the comments for that. But this lady came by and she was like, your dog needs to be on a leash. And I like immediately went to match her energy, where I'm like, I'm not normally like a confrontational person, but I'm kind of like, don't tell me what to do. And so like, I was like, he's fine. And I think I told her like, you need to calm down, which is again, not great. I'm being very vulnerable with you guys right now. But I'm not, no joke, the whole walk back, I was like, why did I react like that?
Right.
And one of the other things Pastor said is like, your potential is revealed in your maturity.
That's it.
Right.
That's
And
it.
so for me, I was just thinking, I'm like, again, I'm being hard on myself in this moment, but I also am grateful that God like was like helping me like work through it. Like, hey, you shouldn't have done that. And I'm like, and he forgives me for it and I'm good. But also just to be aware, like that's one of the things I gotta keep working on.
That was the encouraging thing about this sermon, how God said he didn't just call you on your high points.
Yes.
Yeah.
He didn't just call you in the places that you're proud of. He called you at your low moments too.
That's right.
And in Romans 8:29, where Pastor kind of came from, he says God knew us before we even knew ourselves. Predestined is the word.
Yeah.
And he already had a plan laid out for our weaknesses and our strengths. When we would go off on the woman with the dog.
Yep.
And you know, for me, Colleen, I'm not gonna leave you out there by yourself. But for me, I was actually in the hospital with my mom when this sermon was playing.
Yeah.
And my patience was like, God, when are you gonna do what I'm anticipating? And in the chat right now, we don't know what you're going through, but we would love to pray for you. Put in the chat right now, maybe your end of the year is still hard and you need to see the God of also work. But in that moment, I got a reminder that God is not just wanting to do something for me.
That's right.
He's wanting to do something in me.
Yeah.
He's wanting to develop some character in me. And I know some of you have takeaways and we went through this sermon, but we actually have one in our live studio audience. We do. We have Robert from the Blakeney campus. Go ahead and stand up, Robert. Robert's gonna share his takeaway from this sermon because I know it impacted me, but we wanna know how it impacted you. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, It was a lot to take away from this actual message. But the thing that rested on me the hardest or the most, that kind of like resonated with me, and it continues to sit on me, is God is also the God of self-development. And the line that he made was that self-development is the key or is the direction to self-discovery. All self-development is self-discovery. And when I realized that like as God continues to develop me, I discover more of who I am and who he created me to be. And realizing that, you know, a lot of us think that we already know ourselves so well. Like I know me. Nobody knows me better than I know myself. But realizing that he knew me before I really got to know myself the way I know myself. And so, that was a great option. That was a great book.
That was great. Thank you so much, Robert.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that too, because Pastor, when he was preaching this, he pointed out, like, because Jacob had his name changed.
Yes.
But he didn't say, like, I'm the God of your new fancy name. He said, I'm the God of Jacob, AKA deceiver.
Yes.
Like, that's the name that Scripture uses when he says, I'm the God of Jacob.
That's right.
Wonderful.
And so I thought that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
I love that you just shared that about the self-discovery, because that's something that I was thinking about so much longer after the message of all of this self-development being this discovery of who I already am.
Come on.
And I think that's so much of what this message was about, of like, you already are the thing. It's just deep inside you.
Yes.
You already are a patient person because God is patient.
That's right.
And God is kind. And so if God is living in me, then I must have that attribute as well. So how am I discovering that I already am that person? And that messed with my mind a lot, because I'm like, but I don't feel like I'm these different things that I'm striving to be. But I love that Pastor always talks about when really that's placed on you, that development piece is placed on you. You'll start to see things pull out of you that you didn't think were in there. But you're like, oh, that's inside of me. Maybe it wasn't developed. Maybe it's just being discovered now. Maybe it's something, God, that's already been inside of me. And so I try to think back on that when I think, man, I don't have that. I don't have the thing that I'm looking at that I'm like, man, God, I wish I could just be a little bit more resilient. And he's like, no, you're resilient. You're resilient. Trust in me. Believe in me. Understand that the place that I've put you, I've given you everything that you need to handle what it is that I've put in front of you.
Absolutely.
And then develop it. Right? That's the key word, right? The development. Discovery is one phase, which, as if that's not, it is difficult sometimes, because we don't always see those things in us. That's why they say that we should always have like people around us to help us see some of the things, trusted people that like we sometimes overlook or don't recognize.
Is this a plug for e-groups? Are you doing it
I
again?
am not, but I'm always here for e-groups.
She'll drop it in every time.
It's never not going to happen, let's be real.
You need people around you,
But I really believe it. I really do believe it, and I've really seen it in my own life. Where I won't see something in myself. And then somebody will see it and they'll give me that opportunity, or they'll speak that life into me, and it's helped me develop to the point that I'm at now, because my yeses put the demand on me.
That's right.
Like what you talked about. So if you see, oh, there is that kindness in there, you have to put the demands on you to be kind to develop it. You need both. And so putting in the work after the discovery is just as important. And that's the part that sometimes I think some of us will get the glimpse. Right. Will we be willing to put in the work to actually develop that character within us?
I love how Pastor Steven kind of landed this sermon, and he kind of reminded us that we don't have to be afraid to come to God when we've made that mistake on the road to development. I think it's really important that we still go to God for the things we need internally that are not developed. Depending on our own strength or depending on ourselves. It's how Moses got in trouble when he tried to do it on his own and not depend on God's grace. That's when it fell short. And so I don't know where you're at today, but we want you we want to tell you to keep trusting God, keep believing that He is the God of also, of our weaknesses and our strengths.
That's right. Well, speaking of also, Holly also preached some incredible sermons this year. Britt, I know you have a lot of favorites, but if we had to pick one to talk about.
Okay, well, this one's for the ladies. Where my ladies at? Don't leave me hanging. Make yourself known in the chat. But in all seriousness, our pastor preaches incredible messages every single week that are life-changing.
Yes, that's right.
I've been under his teachings and preaching for 11 years now.
That's right.
And it really has changed my life. And with that, we also have the amazing gift of Holly Furtick.
That's right.
As well. And our First Lady, Pastor Holly, has preached some amazing messages this year, but there is one in particular that she preached on Mother's Day, actually. And it was called Sudden Strength.
Yeah.
And it really is a beautiful picture of how even in our weakest moments, when we look to the right place for dependency, God will strengthen us even in those times. And just as a little refresher, let's take a look at this.
When we experience a difficult situation, we have two choices. We can wonder why, or we can ask, what next? When I sit in my pain for too long, I get stale and I get bitter and nobody wants to be around me. But when I drag my pain to the feet of Jesus, sometimes over and over again, when I seek God, He answers. We're not fighting in our own power. That's the amazing thing. Paul said, be strong in the Lord and in His mighty power. It's His mighty power that is at work on the inside of you. But sometimes you gotta get up. If you wanna activate God's power in your life, you gotta move. You gotta seek Him again and again and again. You gotta arm yourself so that you can stand against the enemy. Don't give in. Don't let him win. Keep fighting even when you're tired.
Do you guys see why I loved it so much?
I get it.
Okay.
Totally
First of all, she hit us with that Ephesians 6. We're gonna be armed.
Yes.
But I really do love so much the handles that she gave us, because she said this, she was talking about how sometimes an unexpected fight does break out. And for me, I can think of the times where, like, you know, I was doing good, I was on my grind, I was doing my thing. And then all of a sudden out of nowhere, I'm like, where did this come from? And because I was so unprepared, like I wasn't expecting it, I went into literal battle, weak, and I didn't know where to find my strength.
That's right.
So the tools that she gave us, I hope that we all took to heart, and if not, it's fine. We're gonna unpack them a little bit more today so that we can really get these in our spirit going into 2024. But here's the deal. She said this, and this is kind of where I want to start. She asked us the questions like, when something does happen in our lives, we can wonder why, or we can ask what's next. And so I kind of wanted to unpack and sit there for just a couple of moments with like, can you guys think through or process through, like, when something unexpected happens, like, what is your default? And then how do you navigate maybe out of what your natural default might be?
That's great. Yeah, I was gonna say, well, do you want like the church answer or like what I actually do?
No, I want the real answer.
So I think, like, for me, and I think this even goes back to a little bit of Pastor's last sermon, is I feel like when something like that happens, I am very quick to like try to figure stuff out on my own. I'll ask every one of my friends before I come to God. And I will, I'll sit in it for a minute. And it's not good, but like that was why her sermon was so helpful for me, because I'm like, it was such a good perspective shift instead of like sitting there asking asking God why and stuff. And you're like, no, like He's gonna use this, like what's next? What do I need to do? And so I love when she talked about like what you do today is giving you strength for tomorrow. And so even what you said, Britt, is like you have to be prepared daily to go into that. And so I think the thing that I've learned about myself is like I have to spend time with God. I'm praying in my car, whether that's reading my Bible, whether that's journaling things I'm grateful for. I have to be filled up in order to be prepared when that next thing comes. And so am I good at it? Not all the time, but I'm learning the things I need to do so that I am prepared when I go into it.
Yeah, I would say I'm good at telling my kids that this is preparation for what's next.
Absolutely.
Because that's the way I see like my life. I mean, everything I'm doing for my kids, and it's like, well, what? I don't want to do that now. No, we're teaching you so that later on, you're gonna thank us later for this because we're helping you to understand you got to clean up after yourself. This will go well for you later in life. I'm teaching you to be disciplined with the things that you're committing to. This will go well for you later in life. And they don't necessarily always love it, but when it happens to me, it's very much different than that, because I'm a fighter in the moment. When something's happening, I'm like, there's gotta be a reason this is happening in this moment, and it's for right now. And so I'm gonna bring everything I have at it. I'm gonna fight it because I wanna fix things. I wanna make things right. I'm a fixer, you know? I'm not one to sit back and be like, let me just really believe and think, what is God trying to teach me here through this? Because that is so difficult for me to do. That is such a difficult difficult thing. It's easy to sit here and talk about, to just say, well, just do it. One of the things I love that Holly said, though, was you got to do the work.
Yeah.
You got to do the work. And you got to do the work to dive in and even just sit back and say, God, what are you showing me? That's work for me.
Yeah.
Because it's not work to just get up and I'm fighting. I'm going after this.
Right.
That's not really work for me. The work does come when I have to sit back and say, God, okay, what do you want to show me through this? What are you trying to teach me through this? What are you trying to help me understand that this is preparation for? And that's tough. That's not easy.
Yeah.
Well, it's the discipline part of what you said is because like I think we want it to be easy, but I'm like the discipline part's hard. Like I don't always want to read my Bible every day. Like truthfully, I'm like, but you have to like make yourself do the things and to see the progress and to see it working. And so it's not easy, but that's what discipline is.
Yeah. Because normally under pressure, we respond so differently. From a psychological standpoint, they say it's 3 responses: fight, flight, or freeze.
Yep.
I would love to know which one. Where my flight people at? Fight, freeze. Yeah.
I think,
Sometimes all 3. Depending on the scenario.
Depends.
I don't know what to do. But as a leader, I find myself always, like you, Chad, wanting to solve it.
Yeah.
And I'm also a worst case scenario person.
Oh, no.
So I'm not trying to solve the actual problem. I'm trying to solve the worst case scenario problem.
That's good.
Which
That's gonna be
doesn't
helpful.
even exist yet.
No.
And I don't know why. And so I feel like my imagination can get away from me. And I try to go into mode. And so I love this sermon because it teaches us how to surrender even in a fight.
It's really kind of cool because the story that Holly was preaching from, it was like about David, and everything had been taken, his wives, which we're not gonna talk about that right now, but everything had been taken, and they were all like at their lowest point, and they're like super weak, like they were exhausted, they couldn't even lament or cry anymore. And then like the strength of the Lord came to David in that moment.
Yeah. Wow.
And so what a beautiful picture of even like when we're going through some really difficult things. And I mean, I don't know about everyone, but this year, I've hit some lows, you know, like life has been lifing, you know,
My favorite quote of the year.
in all seriousness, like, you know, like difficult things, like momming is not easy.
No.
And then, you know, I've experienced loss. I've experienced a lot of real things this year. And in those moments, like when you're talking about all of those, I think I do a little bit of all of it, but one thing I do very practically in those moments, and I don't know if this is right or not, but I always give myself a deadline to feel whatever I want to feel.
That's great.
That's great,
So
Britt.
like when I'm like, I can wall out, I can say what I want. Again, I'm not saying this is best. I'm just saying I give myself permission to, maybe it is, like lamenting is fine, right? But like maybe not some of the ways I do it, but.
What's your normal deadline? Like how long are we talking?
Okay, it depends on what it is,
Okay.
So like, if it's something like, say like my son or my husband like make me mad, I'm gonna say, you know what? I'm gonna go like, I'm literally gonna go take a shower and just sit in my room for an hour.
Okay.
And then I have to get over it because I gotta figure it out. Or if it's, you know, a friend thing, I might take the night and be as angry as I want, and then I'm gonna come back, you know, the next day and we're gonna figure it out.
That's
we gotta
right.
solve this thing.
Yep.
We've gotta move on from it.
Yeah.
Or if it's, I don't know, it's so different depending on, I never let
situation,
myself sit in it though too long. I'm typically one of the next, I'm like,
You're
if
ready
I
for
had
next. Pretty
24
quick.
hours or
Yeah.
less than 24 hours, just because I know if I let myself go too long,
Right.
then it's gonna be really bad for me. Because
Totally.
then I've started a spiral.
And bad for
that
everyone
I'm
around
not gonna
you,
be able
too.
to get out
Yeah.
of. But then there's like different cycles like grief.
Yeah.
Maybe I can't just do 24 hours.
That's,
Right.
But I'm gonna give myself 24 hours to feel everything, and then I'm gonna do something, and then when it hits me again like a wave, I'm gonna give myself another time period to just feel whatever I need to feel and
great.
give myself permission and grace through that season. That's
great. I love
that.
And so, but it also, in my mind, it just triggers something like, you get to be human, you get to feel this, you get to experience this, because you guys know, like, I really am a firm believer of, I know God gave us emotions, but then he tells us things like, be slow to anger. I'm like, you literally gave me this anger.
You want me to
Whose fault
slow.
is this really? You know what I mean?
Blame it on
But I really believe that, I read this devotional years ago that just, and it's always stuck with me. This is maybe like 10, 15 years ago, about like, emotions are meant to catch our attention.
That's right.
So anytime you feel like anger, frustration, like that is a signal to you, not to act out of that, but to bring that to God,
That's
because
right.
it caught your attention for a reason.
It's great, Britt.
And so that is what I've been really working really hard to be able to do. And I feel like the strength piece, though, that Holly taught about in those moments is what's so powerful. Because if you take everything from me, I might be falling out on the floor, trying to figure it out. What am I gonna do? Because I feel some type of way, but I love how she was like, no, God will strengthen you. And then David went and he got back what was his.
He did.
What God had given him.
That's right.
I love the example of David because in the book of Psalms, you see him always expressing what he's feeling, what he's going through, and going to God, and not just saying it to his neighbor. So for me, I love to complain. I don't know where my complainers are. Yeah, I got a lot of issues, guys.
Jason,
I'm going all
this is
in.
therapy right now.
Yeah, I got you. Thank you.
Make yourselves
This
known.
is, I feel so therapeutic.
Good.
But I just want to complain. But when I complain to my wife or my friends, that causes like fear or anxiety to them. But when I complain in the presence of God, He has answers and solutions.
Yeah, that's right.
And so just like you, it's like I'll give myself a moment, but I'm like, okay, God, how can we circle up? This is what I'm really feeling. He's not afraid of my doubt, my anxiety, my fear.
He holds space for all of that.
He says, hey, Jay, come to me. You know, and that's sometimes the hardest part is just to kind of go to God.
Oh, yeah, totally.
No.
It just seems so simple. Like, you're like, we all know the thing to do, but we just don't do it.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Wonder why. Or, like Holly said,
That's right.
ask what's next. What now?
Yeah.
What would you have me do?
That's wonderful.
That's great.
What's next?
Perfect. We do have someone in the crowd as well who has a takeaway from this message.
What's up, Lake Norman?
Here we
go.
The lake.
I resonated with this sermon so much because I was in the middle of a battle of feeling like I wasn't equipped to raise our teenage son. And hearing her say the enemy is out there and he wants you to be too tired for the calling God has put on your life really encouraged me, really shot me in the gut, if I'm being honest. But the pandemic really rocked our teenager's world. He went through a really deep depression and he was this kid that showed up for church every weekend. He volunteered. He was baptized at our church, and now he is questioning God. And it's been a really long battle, but just listening to this sermon reminded me, like, I can't give up. Like, I've got to fight this for him. I have 2 more sons, so I'm going to need that strength for them as well. So, but yeah, it was so
Amazing.
good.
Thank you for sharing that.
That's so great.
That's so powerful and
It is.
that's so real. And I know that there's a lot of people that are here today that can relate to that. And I just thank you for being vulnerable and being in it right now, because there's so many of us that are in it right now. But I also love how the scripture says that the strength comes suddenly.
That's right.
And so wherever you find yourself, that would be our belief and our prayer for you, that the strength will come suddenly.
That's right.
Right now, even in this moment, I believe that you'll be strengthened just in the presence of what today means for us and through this conversation, and just knowing that God will provide the strength that you need, even in the hardest moments, like what Pastor Holly shared with us through this sermon.
Amazing. All right, well, we have one more sermon that we're going to get to talk about. Chad, one of your favorites.
It is one of my
favorites. We're going to go way
favorites.
back here.
We're going to week 2.
That's right.
Of this year, where Pastor rolled out "Do the New You."
Yes.
Okay.
And everybody's shaking their head yes, because they all pre-ordered Pastor's book. Pastor just wrote a new book called "Do the New You," and it's based off of this message and some messages beyond this. But what I love so much is this kind of ties in so much to everything that we've already been talking about, is how the you that really is inside of you, the you that God knows, is not always the me that I know. It's not the me that I see on a daily basis, but the me that God wants me to be is inside of me. And it's really all about what are the different steps that I need to take in life to see that happen.
That's right.
How do I need to really let that come out and walk forward in what God has for me? And so if you missed it, I hope you didn't. You can certainly watch it on YouTube, and I would encourage you to do that. But we have a little recap to show you about it too. Take a look.
The way that you have been living that has been limiting you, it is a product of the patterns of the world that you have copied unconsciously until now. We almost have elevated authenticity to the level of ultimate authority in our lives, to give ourselves permission not to make progress. What wind are you cursing? Because you avoided dealing with the storms inside. The awareness of how I start doesn't have to become indicative of where I end. I believe that there is a power in Christ for you to decide that I don't want to be like what I came from.
the Lord. You are being called this year to do the new you. But he said, before you were born, before I formed you in the womb, before any of the crap happened, God said, I had intimate knowledge of your intellect. And he brought me to church to tell me, do it, the new you.
I gotta go back. I gotta go back and watch it. Gotta go back and watch it.
Yeah.
I love that Pastor was just sharing before we even knew us. He knew everything. And I just feel like I said this just a minute ago, but that has just been flowing throughout today, that before we even got to the place that we're in, God knew that we would be in the place that we're in. God set us up to be exactly where we're at. Yep. He gave us everything we need for where we're at today. But one of the things that Pastor said is, what wind are you cursing? And knowing that there's so much going on, and you may be saying, oh man, I hate that I'm in that position, or I hate that I'm dealing with this right now, or why are they doing that again, or why are kids acting up this way again? What's the wind in your life that you're cursing that if you stop to sit back and say, wait a minute, God, is that actually the thing that you're trying to do in me right now? Is that the me? Yeah. Is that part of me today? And so everybody's been asking questions. Here's my question.
Oh boy.
What's the wind you're cursing today, Jason? What's the wind in life that maybe is something that God's put in your life?
Yeah. I feel like the wind I'm cursing is, I always go back to my leadership because I lead so many people. And maybe you can relate to this. There's always something to solve. And I'm like, why do I have to carry this weight of solving this problem again? Yeah. You know, why do I have to continuously move this forward again? Because sometimes I feel tired. I feel like I don't have the answers. Yeah. People want solutions. They want marriage counseling. They want me to be the source, and I feel empty sometimes. And so it's like, God, why are you bringing me all of this that I have to carry the weight? And maybe you feel that as a parent. Maybe you feel that as a business owner. Like, why am I under this weight? Why am I here again looking for solutions, and people are coming to me for solutions? But I feel like that win has definitely put a resilience in me to just keep going. Sometimes I may not have the answer, and it's okay to tell people, hey, I don't know. But we're gonna pray about it. We're gonna believe God for it, and not in the cliche way. We're actually gonna sit and pray and wait on God to be there. And so I feel like that win comes in moments that I hate to go all the way back to 2020. We're going into a new year. Let's leave that behind us. But I feel like that pressure as a pastor or as a leader, it just kept building and building. Okay, how can we solve this problem? And this year will be full of problems, and I already know it. But I believe that, if I continue to keep my eyes on the one that called me before he knew me, before he knew I would be here. He knew I would be under this weight. And so how does God want me to carry it? And so I feel like that win for me is just constantly solving what's next.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, there's a few things that come to mind.
That you're cursing?
Yeah, in a kind way. No, I think that it's maybe not the same, because actually I'm one of those people that's energized by problems. Yeah. I more so get really annoyed with what I feel like are barriers. You know what I mean? And I just get so frustrated at it. And I'm like, really? Again? Or why is this in the way? This could be so great if just this. Or, whatever that might look like. And so for me, I think that's the thing, but you're right. You've already said a lot of what I would say. Since you're asking such great questions, Chad, and forcing us to now process it in a moment,
real time. Yeah.
Looking back, it really is beautiful how God uses that to really strengthen you and teach you perseverance and not to give up. And you have to push through that to achieve this for my glory. And, and that looks like all types of different things, but it is interesting, but barriers are the thing I'm always for real. But maybe it's because I'm naturally I like to be a go-getter, and so when something's I feel like it's trying to stop me from doing that, I get super frustrated and I'm just so for real, we gonna box up, we gonna square up right now because why? Why are you? You know what I mean? But it is that for me, I think.
Right.
For me, I think the wind that I'm cursing, as you said, is I have these like benchmarks I set for myself where I'm like, I should be here by now in this area of my life. I should be here in this area of my life. So I think for me, it's like season of life where I'm in my head, I'm like, I thought I'd be here. I thought I'd be doing this. I thought, all of these different things. And so I think it's very easy for me to get, I don't know, not like sometimes I get upset about it, but I think like for me, I'm trying to figure out, well, one, these are self-imposed deadlines I've put on myself. It's not like anything God was like, you were supposed to do this. Right. I'm like, no, this is like in my head what I thought. Right. But I think you said it earlier, like there's so much that I'm like, he's teaching me in this season, and there's so many things that I thought I wanted when I was 20. And I'm like, thank God I didn't get that when I was 20. I would have ruined it. Yeah. So that to me, I think is where I struggle the most.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's great.
I would agree with that. It's a both and for me, because in it, Pastor talked all about putting off your old self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so then I always feel like, well, if I'm putting off my old self, then I'm growing toward my new self. But like you said, it's all about the timing and the timelines. And for me, I'm like, so I'm not there yet, though.
Right.
I'm not to what I wanted to be. I'm trying to put off the old self, but I just can't get there yet.
That's real, though,
and so when I'm looking at these markers, like you said, that was like, man, I thought by now this would look this certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I thought by now I'd be done with that.
Yep.
I thought by now I'd be hitting that gym 5 to 6 times a week. I'm still hitting it 3 times a week. What is the problem with it?
You know what I'm saying? All right? Ease off
but these, even in those little things though, is when I start to get discouraged because I feel like, man, well, God, like if I'm building and working toward who you've created me to be, if I'm trying to keep you at the center of my life, then I thought things would look a little bit different by now. And so that can be discouraging, but it really is trusting that, like we've been saying, that God placed me right here. He knew that I'd be exactly where I am.
Right.
He knew that I'd be in the position that I am, with the people that I am, with the people that were not, with just all of the different situations that you find yourself in, and believing that, God, this was your plan. This is what you had in motion all along.
I love what y'all are bringing up, because I feel like this year I had to abandon the image of who I thought I needed to be. I had to abandon the image. And I go back, this year I got the opportunity to preach in a prison. We do a prison ministry here at Elevation Church. I think it's incredible. And preaching to inmates that are, just locked up for life sentences or 12 years, I mean, what do you say to them? How do you encourage them in such a hard place?
Right.
But this year I experienced the loss of my mom, and sharing with them that I had to abandon the image that God was gonna do what I thought he was going to do in my life. But once again, he was doing something in me.
Wow.
And I could stand and share my pain or my grief with them and say, hey, God still can be faithful in difficult situations.
That's great.
So the image of me this year was like, I'm gonna be strong. I'm gonna be a great leader. I'm gonna do all these incredible things. But God saw me being more vulnerable, more
That's
honest.
great, Jason. Yeah.
Extending more hope through the gospel of Jesus Christ, and not through my life, but what he's done. And so abandoning that image for me was how the new me kind of came forth. But I didn't think it was coming forth through something so hard.
Yeah.
I mean, as we wrap up this year, I just can't think of a better sermon to just reflect on when you think back to the beginning of the year when you first heard this. And it was like, okay, this year, this is what I'm gonna do then. If I'm gonna do the new me, this is the thing that I'm gonna do. You start putting things in place. And now we're at the end of the year and we're like,
did I do anything?
Wait. But here's one thing that I love that Pastor said in the message. He said, it is in obedience that potential is realized.
That's great.
Yes.
And I think that as we look back this year, if we can look back and say, God, man, it definitely doesn't look like I thought it was gonna look. But what I can say is, I've tried to be obedient. I've tried to just follow what it is that you've put in front of me step by step. If you've closed the door, then you've closed the door. If you've opened a door, I've tried to walk through it, God. I've tried to make new habits. And just understanding that there's grace for those that are just saying, God, I just want to be obedient to you this year. And it may not have ended up the way that I thought, but if you're being obedient, Pastor said, that's where your potential is realized. And I really believe that God respects that. And he's like, man, I see you trying.
Yeah.
And as we look forward to a new year, it's exciting just to believe God for what's next. You know, hey, maybe those things didn't happen this year, but God, all in your timing.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
what you want to happen.
That's right. And I think when you do look back on this year, whether, you know, we're doing this here as a church, but like collectively, like look back on your own life. Like, what has God done for you? And I think hopefully it'll get us excited for what he's going to do next year as we continue to press into him and, you know, keep circling some of the same stuff.
Absolutely.
But at a higher level.
At a higher level, exactly.
Hey, thank you for watching the Elevation Church YouTube. I want you to subscribe. That way you can know when we go live and post new content. Make sure to leave me a comment. Let me know what spoke to you today, where you're watching from, and what we can pray for you about. And if you'd like to support the ministry financially, you can click the Give button now and help us continue reaching people around the world for Jesus Christ. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.